for being here. First of all, let me just take a moment to thank the hundreds of volunteers that are gathered right here today as we speak to help rebuild King Street and Meeting Street and the other places downtown. There's a feeling of hope and optimism that we can put a plan forward collectively using our community to repair, replace, and rebuild. There's a feeling of uneasiness across the country, pain and uneasiness. We've seen this note here far too often, and we don't have to go to Minnesota to find evidence of police brutality and mistreatment by law enforcement. As we reflect right here in our own city, Charleston and North Charleston, we've seen violent encounters with the police, starting with Asbury Wilder in North Charleston when I first began practicing law, to Denzel Cornell, right down the street at Bridgeview Apartments. And of course, everybody is familiar with the shooting of Walter Scott Jr. But I am the product of a father who was a sharecropper. And for many, many years, he picked cotton for his father on the Marion Gresset farm. And my daddy and people in generations like my father lived in very, very tough days. They've witnessed things that were unimaginable to me as a young kid. But instead of violence, they marched peacefully, they were constructive in their thoughts, and as a result, it led to voting at the ballot box. And so I am so pleased today to be joined with a significant part of the Charleston delegation, House members, and as your senator, right here at this historic church, State Senator Marlin Kempson of District 42, we are ready to roll up our sleeves to constructively begin to put our city back together. There is no excuse for violence, and we must condemn looting, rioting, and all forms that are counterproductive to what we want to do as policymakers. When we had the shooting of Walter Scott Jr., I had just taken Senate office, but we worked together constructively to incorporate the ideas of State Representative Wendell Gilliard in South Carolina. Who would have thunk it? Became the first state in the nation to pass a body camera law. Now, that I've said previously, there are gaps in the law, but let us be mindful, but for body cameras, but for video, we would not see what we're seeing flashed across the television stations across this nation. And more importantly, we would only have one version of the story. Video camera is the best evidence, and we must work when we get back, State Representative Pendarvis, to fill the gaps in the body camera law, so it is a requirement and mandate that police officers have this equipment on. It protects the police officers and it protects civilians. Secondly, within 90 days after the shooting of Walter Scott Jr. in North Charleston, there was the massacre at Mother Emanuel, one of the nation's most historic African-American churches, a beacon of light for many in the civil rights movement. And we worked tirelessly in a way to achieve objective results. There was no riot. There was no violent. Those are tools of the unheard. Now, I feel the pain of many young people and citizens all across the country who are unrest, who feel uneasy. I'm a father I'm a family man. I have relatives in this community. I feel uneasy. But if we want a permanent solution, we have to enact legislation and we have to vote so we can have permanency. Permanency not only for laws to be on the books, to respect people's rights and citizens and be treated with respect and dignity, but also we have to close the economic gap in Charleston County because too many young people and too many of our working class citizens, black and white, are being left behind. And so today I just wanted to echo the thoughts of my colleagues in the State General Assembly in front of this historic church, one of the churches that is the bedrock of the civil rights movement, not only in Charleston but across the nation, in a productive way. We want to roll up our sleeves and set a path forward. And in that regard, I have been on the phone all night. We anticipate launching a fund. We have already had an anonymous donor who has agreed to match a $25,000 raised. He will match it with another $25,000. Got a call from a local lawyer on the way over here. She has pledged $5,000. So if we raise $25,000, we will get another $25,000, and we've already raised $5,000. So that would be, I'm not a mathematician, but that would be $55,000. And what we want to do with funds raised is rebuild the damage in our community, but also reach out to those who are suffering. Reach out to create programs for our young people who've given up hope. This is not about us versus them. This is about people of goodwill versus institutionalized racism that has plagued our community for far too long. I'm going to hand this off to State Representative Wendell Gilliard. Representative Wendell Gilliard is no stranger to representing those who have not been heard, those who are hurting, and he has been a beacon of light for our community, and he has certainly worked with me in the state legislature to get things done in Columbia on behalf of the people. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, in the words of Dr. King, and he stated it and said it well, when evil men bomb and burn, good men must come together and bind and build. That's what we're faced with here today. What I see on King Street, our citizens decided to come together to build, to bind. I'm proud of that. He also stated, when he was among us, he said that rioting are the voices that have gone unheard. What you saw yesterday in Charleston, South Carolina, we should all be able now to witness that the fact that our young people, both black and white, have come together and they're looking for leadership. They're pushing back. We as leaders must be in a position to let them know that there's a way to do that. You don't burn and bomb. You don't push people down or attack them. Because when you do that, then you have to look in the mirror and look at yourselves and say, am I now the enemy? I'm doing what my perpetrator is doing out there? We have to give them leadership. What I saw yesterday, what the world saw yesterday, is raw energy coming from our younger generation. I challenge them now, we challenge them now. Take that raw energy, take it to the polls, take it to the community association meetings, Take it to the State House and work with your lawmakers. Work with your citizens now. And turn that raw energy into votes. Speak at the polls also. We have to understand what we're faced with today. We have great opportunity that's facing us today. If we cannot build bridges in the time of need, then we have to look at the people who are representing us. We have to elect people in office who are not afraid to represent the many and not the few, not afraid of the status quo. If we had backbone and leadership in Washington, you and I would not be in here in front of this historic church today. We need voices, leadership in Washington. And then when you look at government on all levels, so goes the same. We feel the young people pain, their fear. We feel you, and we understand you. But to go out here and stoop to the level of corruption is wrong. Don't do that. Everything that the SCLC movement, Rainbow Push, National Action Network has been speaking about all through the years, if we go on the negative, you're working against the philosophy of those great civil rights organizations. I had, and I'm going to be short, I had a lot of texts coming to my phone last night. And the question was, from everybody that texted me, where are you guys? Where are the leaders? And I thought to myself, well, when you look at the situation with Joseph Floyd Manor, we are there. When you look at the situation of the hate crime bill in Colombia, we are there. When you look at the situation as far as organizing people to come together, register to vote, work with your communities, create things that are positive, that's where these leaders are. The question begs, and I text all of them back, where are you? Where are you? You could go to Google and find out where we are. We are among our people doing the work that we were elected to do. And we are not afraid to talk the truth and represent the many and not the few. But if we yield to corruption and destruction, then we are not leaders. If you don't hear our voices guiding people the right way, then please make sure that you don't elect us again. Please, citizens. Now, in closing on my part, we have work to do around the world, not only here in Charleston. We're right at the back door of the anniversary of Mother Emanuel in come June. And here we are now trying to rectify situations from years ago that everybody started out on a positive note. We together can make things happen for the betterment of the future of all, of the future of all. Thank you.
I want to thank you, Representative Gilliard. I now want to call on State Representative Marvin Pendarvis. Marvin represents primarily North Charleston, but he has been a tireless advocate for the people, a champion this year and last year.
My name is Marvin Pendarvis, State Representative, House District 113. I guess to add some levity to the moment, I should have learned a long time ago you don't go after Representative Wendell Gilliard. I'm a new father, a relatively new husband, and a member of the North Charleston community that's been ravaged by a number of racial acts in the last several years. And so what took place in Minneapolis on Monday affected me unlike any other issue because I can relate, I can sympathize, and I feel the anger I hear the frustrations of the people, and like them, I want to see some change in the system. But what happened last night in walking down King Street and seeing the aftermath was counterproductive to what we were trying to do. I was part of the protest yesterday. It started at 2 p.m. And about 98% of that protest, you had blacks, you had whites, you had people of all ages, all backgrounds coming together, marching for a cause. Because the reality is there's a conversation that needs to be had in this country regarding race. It's an uncomfortable conversation, but it's a necessary conversation. And we were having that conversation, or we at least started the first steps to opening up that conversation yesterday. And so I was disappointed to see when I got back to my house around 6 p.m. and turned on the news that a lot of the good work by men and women put in yesterday was hijacked by those who sought to engage in criminal activity. Now, I don't condone the violence. I don't condone the looting. I don't condone the rioting that we saw on King Street last night. And so my message to anyone out there under the sound of my voice, and I know we've got the news media here, and anyone that may be watching on Facebook or any live, and particularly those of you that may be thinking about coming back out tonight or the nights coming, I want you to think about a few things. And a lot of it has to do with what Representative Gilliard said before and Marlon Kempson. There's a theme that is overarching in this conversation regarding productivity, being constructive in how we do things. There's a lot of energy that we saw last night. And my question to you, my challenge to you is, how do we harness that energy in a productive way? How do we harness that energy and direct it toward improving our community for the better? How do we harness it in the voting booth on June the 9th or in November to ensure that we have the people in office that's going to represent us to the best of the ability and dismantle the institution of racism that we've got in this country and in this state and even in our cities? How do we harness that energy? Again, I feel your pain. I get it. I'm young. I'm 30 years old. And so I understand the frustrations of the young people, not only here in Charleston, but across the country. A lot of people have heard. And so, you know, you heard the quote of Dr. King about riots being the voices of the unheard. Amen. Well, I will say this. As your elected leader, I hear you. I hear you loud and clear. I understand the direction that you want to go. And so my challenge to you is work with me. Understand that we all have a role to play. And let's do what we can to make this society move forward. It's going to take all of us. And there's nothing good that's going to come out by dismantling the institutions that are here within our city. There's a bigger institution that we must dismantle. But it's going to take us to be methodical, be strategic, be active, and direct our energy in a direction that's going to bring about the change that we want to see. And so again, we don't need to see what happened last night happened again. But if there's anything that's come out of last night, I hope it's this. And this is for everyone, people who are engaging, people who may be thinking about engaging further, people who were victims, and people who just happen to be sympathetic because we're all Charlestonians. Let this be a lesson that we all learn about how we move forward. Let's let this be the conversation that's the spark of the conversation that really has to be had about how we can have real substantive change in this community. It has to happen. My hope is this. I hope things do not get back to normal. I know there's a conversation about rebuilding Charleston and getting back King Street, but my goal is I don't want things to go back to normal. I want us to get to a point where we see some kind of progress. And as unfortunate or fortunate as that may be, it's not going to look the same as it was last week. But that's necessary. That's the place that we've come at in this society, in this country. We're in some interesting times in our world, y'all. We're in some interesting times. And we cannot afford to be asleep at the wheel. We cannot afford to come against each other, especially in a time when we need to be rallying and coming together as a united front. All races, all colors, all shades, all backgrounds, all religions, all communities. And so let's do what we must, because what we must is necessary. Thank you.
So just a couple of observations. Let me thank Pastor Dixon. He's a community leader. He's here supporting these efforts. Let me also recognize Pastor James Keaton. He is the pastor of this great church, a church that has been at the major forefront of the civil rights movement. And we will all collectively sit down and plan a path forward. As I've mentioned, and then we'll take some questions. We have someone who lives in this local community who has committed $25,000. He will match $25,000, meaning that we have to raise $25,000. We've already raised $5 from a local attorney. And so, guys, we have a goal of 15 more thousand, and then we'll get another $1,000. Mullins McLeod, Colleen Condon. So we're now at, somebody help me with the math, but we've now just raised $7,000, and this money will be used to help build and repair what was torn up to the extent it will be necessary, and then invest in programs that these two state representatives have announced. And so, in sum and in closing, when I talked about my daddy growing up as a sharecropper and his generation facing tough, challenging times, the lesson of that generation, which led to the civil rights legislation that empowered our community to vote and make change, is that we must be strategic, we must be peaceful, and we must mobilize our community and empower our citizens to engage in a constructive way. And that is the only way we will achieve results out of the state that we find ourselves in. We want to invest in not tearing things down, but building this community up. We'll take any questions that anybody has, and then we'll adjourn on this press conference. Yes, ma'am.
Senator Kimpson, a lot of pain, a lot of emotion up and down King Street as you all have been surveying the damage, talking with other state leaders. What do you think is the tone moving forward right now as Charlestonians are out helping to rebuild the damage from last night?
Well, as I've mentioned, I'm very, very grateful to the hundreds, literally hundreds of people that are on King Street right now, helping clean up and repair, scrubbing sidewalks and buildings. That is the Charleston that we all know. We've been through some difficult times here during the time that I've been a state senator, and I think that will set the tone for us going forward. And so I think the tone will be one of doing constructive things, but as Representative McDarvis pointed out, we cannot go back to the same old, same old. We can't go back to just having a bunch of forms and empty rhetoric. We need substantive plans, and that's why we're here today, trying to navigate solutions and prepare our community for a hard path forward in terms of doing good work on behalf of all people. We are in this together. All of us are in this together. We have every interest in preserving our homes and our businesses that people own that live here. So we'll have to be constructive advocates working together, black and white and all ethnicities, young and old, to put a path forward so that is inclusive, including bridging the economic gap.
And I'm glad he said the economic gap, because that is so important to the young people from yesterday in their message, because not going back to normal is like when you walk on King Street. And I come from an era where we had black, white, Jewish, Italian business in one of the most important streets in Charleston. We pray and hope, and this is the message that came out yesterday from our young generation. that we create those type of business, because there is an economic dysfunctional system in this country. And even right here, there is a social dysfunctional system right here in this country, and even right here. And until we talk about it, we can make progress when we have dialogue and speak the truth. We have enough economic power to share to all ethnicity. All people. There's nothing wrong with that. And we have to understand that. And we can get back to that. And I would pray and hope, we would pray and hope. That's one of the very important things that come out of all this. Economic equality, empowerment for all. Believe me, if you check this country history, when you share the wealth, and you understand the social conditions that we're in, we get along as family, as one. So thank you for saying that.
I would be remiss if I didn't say, and you mentioned the tone. I can't begin to guess what the tone will be for a lot of people going forward. But for a lot of the business owners that were affected last night, I imagine the initial reaction will be anger and rage. And my hope and prayer is this, that it does not undo the good work that we're setting out to do in trying to eradicate the injustices in this society. I definitely feel for a lot of the people that were personally and financially impacted. A lot of people's livelihoods are at stake from what I've been hearing and reading. But I don't want it to undo the good work that was done. I hope that you don't categorize or cast wide dispersions on groups that want to continue to organize and stand against the system. And so we sympathize with you, but I did want to make that known.
While this has been going on, we just have received another commitment for $1,000. So
Senator, do we have a page or anything that people
well,
can go to
we're
yet?
going to post some information
Post it on
later.
your page? Okay.
It may be tomorrow. But what we've done is now raised $8,000. We have to raise $25,000 to get the $25,000 match. We want to rebuild that area across the street, and we want to rebuild our community and create programs for our children and for all those who are feeling pain to constructively participate in.
I do have a question. I would love to know, as far as what we're going to do in the short term, literally right now, we've had a crisis in the last 24 hours. What are we doing to make sure that that does not carry on into tonight? We already have protests starting up.
Yeah.
What are we doing in our community leadership to make sure this stops right now?
Yeah, well, I think what if you look back in the past, what has been success in part is that the law enforcement, the local mayors have been engaged with the local leadership.
Mm-hmm.
And in a way, because we had not had what we saw last night, in a way that probably made us a little too comfortable expecting the outcome of last night to be what it's been historically in Charleston. That being of peace, of collective cooperation. And so I think many leaders, including myself, quite frankly, were caught off guard by what we saw, because it was not something that we're used to. So today, we will be and have been on the phone with the local leadership. Talked with Mayor Tecklenburg through the night last evening, and I talked with him by text this morning. We will be in touch with Chief Reynolds as well. It's very important that we bring some level of calmness to our community, but not any sense of complacency.
Cleaning up down the street.
The gentleman asked where the mayor is. I have not
He's
seen.
on the cleanup
He's on the
detail.
cleanup, but I have talked to him.
Yeah.
I have talked to him.
Yeah.
All right.